High Admiral Zentkar stood before the Galactic Council's emergency session, his 6 arms trembling as he delivered news that would shake the foundation of their ancient civilization. The massive chamber, carved from a single asteroid and adorned with the symbols of 12,000 member species, had never witnessed such terror in a military commander's voice. "The Devourers have broken through the Kepler defense line," Zentkar announced, his voice echoing through the crystalline walls. 17 star systems have gone dark in the past cycle. Their bioships are adapting faster than we can counter them. A wave of panicked clicks, chirps, and telepathic bursts rippled through the assembled representatives. The Devourer threat had been growing for decades, but the ancient defense lines were supposed to hold for centuries more. Counselor Vexhai, her translucent form shimmering with distress, raised a tentacle. "What the Titan-class dreadnoughts? The quantum disruptors?" "Consumed," Zentkar replied flatly. "The Devourers don't just destroy our ships. They absorb them, learn from them, become stronger. Each victory makes them more dangerous." The chamber fell silent except for the nervous rustling of various alien appendages. Every species present had contributed their greatest weapons, their most advanced technology, their finest warriors to the defense effort. None of it mattered against an enemy that grew stronger with each battle. Elder Mordun, ancient even by ethereal standards, spoke from his place at the council center. His voice carried the weight of millennia. "There is one option, one we swore never to consider." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Every being present knew what he meant, though none dared speak it aloud. "The forbidden protocols," whispered Counselor Ninera, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's light in fractals of fear. "The gods themselves decreed that path close to us." Elder Mordun's ancient form flickered with memories older than most civilizations. 10,000 years ago, when the darkness between stars last threatened our galaxy, there was a species the gods contacted. A young race, barely beyond their home system. The gods gave them a simple message: when a galaxy calls, you will answer. "Humans," breathed Admiral Zentkar, and the name sent ripples of unease through the assembly. Every military commander knew the legends, the whispered stories passed down through generations of officers. The same humans the gods then commanded us never to contact directly, Elder Mordun continued. The same species they placed under divine protection, surrounding their space with phenomena that make approach nearly impossible. Unstable wormholes, gravitational anomalies, temporal distortions, barriers that destroy any ship that attempts unauthorized contact. Counselor Vexhai's form solidified with determination. Surely the gods would understand. This is an extinction-level threat. "The gods," Elder Mordun said slowly, "are no longer answering our calls. Their silence has been absolute for 3,000 years. We don't know if they sleep, if they've abandoned us, or if they've transcended beyond our understanding." The chamber erupted in debate. Some species called for immediate action, willing to risk divine wrath. Others insisted they find another way, that breaking the gods' most sacred decree would bring worse catastrophe than the Devourers. High Admiral Zentkar studied the tactical displays floating before him. Red markers showed Devourer incursions, spreading like a plague across the galaxy's spiral arms. At their current rate of expansion, they would reach the core worlds within 50 standard cycles. "There's something else," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Our deep space sensors have detected unusual activity in Sector 7749, the human quarantine zone. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases. The barriers around their space have been shifting." Elder Mordun's ancient eyes fixed on the Admiral. "Shifting how?" "They're weakening," Zentkar replied. "Not failing, but adapting, as if responding to an external threat. The temporal distortions have stabilized into what appears to be an early warning network. The gravitational anomalies have reorganized into defensive formations." A chill ran through the assembly. The human's prison was becoming a fortress. Counselor Ninera's voices harmonized in a chord of realization. "They know. Somehow, they know about the Devourers." "Which means," Elder Mordun said softly, They're preparing for war. The debate raged for hours. Some species threatened to break away from the council and attempt contact on their own. Others demanded they exhaust every conventional option first. But as reports continued streaming in, more systems lost, more fleets consumed, the Devourer advance accelerating. The reality became undeniable. They were losing, badly. High Admiral Zenthkar had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries. He'd fought pirates, rebellions, and interdimensional incursions. He'd never retreated from a battle in his life. But as he watched the tactical display update with yet another system going dark, he felt something he'd never experienced before. Complete, overwhelming despair. "Admiral," came a whisper from his aide, Commander HFY. "There's something you should see." The young Valdorian's scales had gone pale, her usual blue-green hue fading to almost white. She handed him a data tablet with trembling claws. "It's from Deep Survey Station Omega 7, she explained. They were monitoring the edge of human space when the Devourers hit Sector 7751. Zenthkar read the report twice, his mind struggling to process the information. According to the data, a Devourer bioship had approached the human quarantine zone and simply stopped. Not destroyed, not repelled. It had ceased all forward motion and begun broadcasting what appeared to be a distress signal. "This makes no sense," he muttered. "The Devourers don't retreat. They don't call for help. They consume everything until there's nothing left to consume." Commander HFY's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Sir, there's more. The bioship's neural signature shows patterns consistent with fear." The concept was almost incomprehensible. The Devourers were a hive-mind entity that had consumed entire galaxies. They were the nightmare that made nightmares wake up screaming. They didn't feel fear. They were fear pure and distilled. Zenthkar looked up at the council chamber, where the debate continued to rage. Representatives were shouting, threatening, pleading. Some had already begun transmitting authorization codes to their home fleets. The galaxy was on the verge of complete chaos. But somewhere beyond the divine barriers, in a region of space no council ship had entered for 10 millennia, something had made the Devourers afraid. Elder Mordun called for order, his ancient voice somehow cutting through the cacophony. "The time for debate has ended," he announced. "I call for an emergency vote. All in favor of activating the forbidden protocols and attempting contact with the human species." The vote was closer than Zenthkar had expected, but desperation won over divine fear. By a margin of less than 1,000 votes out of millions cast, the Galactic Council authorized the breaking of their oldest and most sacred law. As the session ended and representatives began filing out, their various forms of body language all showing the same emotion, terror at what they'd just done, High Admiral Zenthkar remained behind with Elder Mordun. "How do we even begin?" Zenthkar asked. "The barriers around their space will destroy any ship we send." Elder Mordun was quiet for a long moment, his form flickering through memories and possibilities. "There's a way," he finally said. "In the deepest archives, there are records of the first god ships. Vessels built with divine blessing, designed to carry the gods' own messages. Only one still exists. The eternal messenger, Zenthkar breathed. But that ship hasn't flown in 8,000 years. Its crews are long dead, its systems archaic. Its hull bears the mark of the gods themselves," Elder Mordun countered. "If any ship can pass through the barriers, it would be that one." Zenthkar nodded slowly, already beginning to plan the mission in his mind. They would need a volunteer crew, knowing they might be flying to their deaths, either from the barriers from divine wrath, or from whatever response the humans might have to unwelcome visitors. "There's one more thing," Elder Mordun added as they prepared to leave the chamber. "The old records speak of humanity with unusual terms. They're not described as a warrior race or an advanced civilization. The gods call them something else." "What?" Elder Mordun's form shimmered with something that might have been fear or anticipation. "Problem solvers. The gods said humans were the species that could look at the impossible and find a way to make it work." As they walked through the empty chamber, their footsteps echoing off ancient walls. Both beings contemplated the magnitude of what they'd just set in motion. Somewhere across the galaxy, Devourer bioships continued their relentless advance, consuming everything in their path. And somewhere beyond divine barriers that had protected them for 10,000 years, humanity waited in the dark, unaware that the galaxy was about to break the oldest law in creation to ask for their help. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The gods had forbidden contact with humans to protect the galaxy from them. Now the galaxy's only hope might be to unleash whatever it was the gods had been so afraid of. High Admiral Zentkar just hoped they would survive long enough to regret their decision. The Eternal Messenger drifted through space like a ghost from a forgotten age, its hull bearing scars from battles fought before most civilizations had discovered fire. Captain Teldar stared at the view screen as they approached the edge of human space, watching reality itself begin to bend and twist around them. Gravitational distortions increasing to level 9, reported Navigator Kessun, his crystalline form resonating with harmonic stress patterns. The barriers are responding to our presence. Teldar nodded grimly. They'd been traveling for 12 standard days, and each passing hour had brought new horrors. Reports from the front lines grew worse by the day. Entire sectors consumed, refugee fleets scattered and hunted, the Devourer advance accelerating beyond all projections. 3 more Council worlds had fallen just since they'd begun this mission. Captain, called out communications officer Yindare from her station, her bioluminescent patches flickering with anxiety. I'm detecting something unusual. The temporal distortions ahead aren't random. They're forming patterns. What kind of patterns? Mathematical progressions. Prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, even what appears to be solutions to quantum field equations. Sir, someone is using the barriers as a massive computational matrix. The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of ancient systems. The crew of the Eternal Messenger consisted of volunteers from 18 different species, all of them aware they were likely flying to their deaths. But the revelation that the barriers weren't just defenses, they were tools being actively used, sent a chill through everyone present. How long until we reach the inner boundary? Teldar asked. 17 minutes at current speed, Navigator Kessun replied. Captain, the energy readings are off our charts. Whatever's generating these barriers is drawing power from sources I can't even identify. Through the view screen, space had become a kaleidoscope of impossible physics. Streams of light bent back on themselves, creating closed loops that sparked with contained lightning. Gravity wells opened and closed like breathing, pulling at their ship with forces that should have torn it apart. But the Eternal Messenger held together, its God-blessed hull somehow adapting to each new impossibility. Contact in 10 minutes, announced Sensor Operator Velmoth. Sir, I'm reading massive structures ahead. Not ships, installations. They're built into the fabric of space-time itself. Teldar had commanded vessels for 6 decades, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what appeared on the tactical display. The sensors showed construct that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their purpose unclear, but their scale staggering. Some appeared to be harvesting energy from collapsing stars. Others seemed to be manufacturing materials that shouldn't exist according to known physics. By the gods, whispered Navigator Kessun. What have the humans been doing for 10,000 years? Growing, came a new voice from behind them. The entire bridge crew spun around to find a figure standing near the communication station, a figure that definitely hadn't been there moments before. It appeared humanoid, but wrong somehow, as if it existed in too many dimensions for their 3-dimensional minds to properly process. I am Ambassador Chun, the figure said, its voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's hull vibrate. I apologize for the abrupt arrival, but your vessel's approach triggered our early warning systems. We've been monitoring the Devourer incursion for some time. Captain Teldar found his voice after several seconds of stunned silence. You're human? Ambassador Chin tilted its head in what might have been amusement. I was originally. That was before the Convergence project reached completion, before we learned to think with the quantum foam itself. But we remember what we were, and we understand why you've come. Communications Officer Yandere's bioluminescent patches were flashing in rapid panic sequences. Sir, I'm not reading any life signs from the entity, but our instruments are detecting quantum fluctuations that suggest it's somehow interfacing directly with the ship's systems. We've been watching your progress through our barrier network, Ambassador Chen continued, apparently unaware of or unconcerned by their distress. Your ship bears the mark of the first makers, what you call gods. They built you well, though the design principles are rather primitive by current standards. Current standards? Teldar managed to ask. We've had 10,000 years to improve upon their work. The gods gave us a gift when they isolated us. Time to evolve beyond the limitations of biology, beyond the constraints of classical physics. We've learned to think with the universe itself. The ambassador gestured toward the view screen, where the impossible structures became suddenly, terrifyingly clear. They weren't buildings or ships. They were thoughts given physical form, consciousness rendered in matter and energy on a galactic scale. The Devourers, Teldar said, forcing himself to focus on their mission. Can you help us stop them? Ambassador Chen's form shifted, becoming more solid, more recognizably human. For a moment, Teldar could see what they had once been, a species not unlike his own people, but with something indefinable in their bearing. Something that suggested they had looked into the heart of creation and found it wanting. The Devourers, the ambassador said slowly, are not what you think they are. They're not invaders from another galaxy. They're not even truly alive in any sense you would understand. Then what are they? Cleanup crew. The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Several crew members made sounds of distress in their native languages. I don't understand, Teldar said. The universe has natural processes for dealing with civilizations that grow beyond certain parameters. The Devourers are one such process, a form of cosmic antibody that emerges when a galaxy's collective intelligence reaches critical mass. Ambassador Chun moved to the tactical display, its form seeming to merge briefly with the holographic projections. The display changed, showing not star charts, but complex mathematical models that hurt to look at directly. Your Galactic Council represents approximately 47 million sapient species across 12,000 star systems. The collective computational power of your civilizations has reached what we call the recognition threshold. The universe has noticed you, and it wants to destroy us. It wants to maintain equilibrium. When a galaxy becomes too intelligent, too organized, too successful at manipulating the fundamental forces of reality, the universe responds. The Devourers are that response. Teldar felt something cold settling in his chest. How do you know this? Because we triggered the same response 8,000 years ago. The Devourers came for us first. The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of ship systems. Through the view screen, the impossible structures of human space stretched away into infinity, their purpose now taking on a terrifying new meaning. You fought them, Teldar said. It wasn't a question. We did more than fight them. We learned from them. We discovered that the Devourers are not malicious. They're simply following universal law, like gravity or thermodynamics. They serve a function in maintaining cosmic stability. But they're still destroying our worlds. Because your worlds have become a threat to universal order. Not intentionally, but inevitably. When enough species reach sufficient technological advancement, their collective manipulation of space-time begins to destabilize local reality. The Devourers prevent that destabilization by resetting the affected area. Ambassador Chun turned back to face the captain, its eyes now clearly visible and disturbingly human despite everything else about it. The gods understood this. That's why they isolated us when our species began approaching the threshold. They knew what we might become. What you became, Teldar said, or what you're becoming. Both. We're no longer bound by the limitations that trigger the Devourer response. We exist in harmony with universal law rather than in opposition to it. We become something the universe doesn't need to correct. Navigator Kessun suddenly looked up from his station, his crystalline form vibrating with alarm. Captain, I'm reading massive energy spikes throughout the barrier network. Something's happening. The view screen shifted to show space beyond human territory, where a sight that defied comprehension was unfolding. Devourer bioships, each the size of a moon, were approaching the outer barriers in formation. But they weren't attacking, they were waiting. They've been gathering for weeks, Ambassador Chen explained. The Devourers recognize what we've become, but they're confused by your presence here. They don't understand why we would risk exposure by allowing you through the barriers. Will they attack? Teldar asked. That depends on what you're willing to sacrifice. The ambassador moved to the center of the bridge, its form becoming more solid, more present. When it spoke again, its voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with the quantum foam itself. The Devourers will accept one of two outcomes. Either we help them complete their mission by allowing the reset to proceed, or we demonstrate that your species can evolve as we did, beyond the need for such correction. And how do we do that? You join us. Permanently. We help your species undergo the convergence, the transformation that will allow you to exist in harmony with universal law. But the process requires abandoning everything you currently are. Your biology, your individual consciousness, your separate species identities. You would become part of something larger, something that thinks with the cosmos itself. The bridge crew exchanged glances, each seeing their own horror reflected in alien faces. The choice was between extinction and absorption, between dying as themselves or living as something unrecognizable. There's a third option, Ambassador Chen said softly. But it requires breaking laws older than galaxies. What option? We teach you to fight the universe itself. The words hung in the air like a challenge to reality. Through the view screen, the Devourer bioships continued their patient vigil, waiting for humanity's decision and the galaxy's fate. Captain Teldar stared at Ambassador Chun, the weight of impossible choices crushing down on him like the gravity of a collapsed star. Around him, his crew waited in tense silence, each species represented on the bridge, processing the revelation in their own way. Fight the universe itself, he repeated slowly. What does that mean exactly? Ambassador Chen's form shifted again, becoming less human and more like a living equation that hurt to perceive directly. It means breaking the fundamental laws that govern cosmic equilibrium. It means teaching your species to manipulate reality not just within the bounds of natural law, but in defiance of it. The gods, whispered communications officer Yindare, her bioluminescent patches flickering in patterns of pure terror. The gods forbade contact with humans for this reason. The gods, Ambassador Chen replied, were afraid of what we might become if left unchecked. They were right to be afraid, but they also underestimated our capacity for self-control. Through the view screen, space itself began to change. The impossible structures of human civilization were moving, reconfiguring themselves into new patterns that spoke of preparation for war. But not war as any species understood it. War against the fundamental forces that governed existence itself. Show me, Teldar said, his military training overriding his existential terror. Show me what you're proposing. Ambassador Chen nodded and gestured toward the tactical display. Reality within the holographic projection bent and twisted, showing scenes that violated every known law of physics. Fleets of ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, weapons that fired concentrated impossibility, shields that protected by convincing reality they weren't there. Traditional warfare operates within the framework of universal law, the ambassador explained. You accelerate matter to high velocities, you release energy in destructive patterns, you manipulate gravity and electromagnetic fields. But you do all of this according to rules the universe has established. The display showed devourer bioships attempting to consume a human vessel. Instead of being absorbed, The ship simply ceased to exist in any dimension the Devourers could access, then reappear behind them and convince space-time that the bio ship had never existed. We've learned to edit reality directly, to treat the universe not as a set of immutable laws, but as a complex program that can be rewritten in real time. Navigator Kessun's crystalline form resonated with harmonic frequencies that sounded like screaming. That's impossible. Reality has fundamental constants. You can't just change the laws of physics. You can't, Ambassador Chen agreed. We can, and we can teach you to do the same. Captain Teldar studied the tactical projections, his mind struggling to process warfare that operated on principles he couldn't understand. What's the cost? There's always a cost. The universe will notice. Right now, the Devourers are a localized response to your galaxy's growing intelligence. If we teach you to fight reality itself, the response will escalate. The universe will deploy countermeasures that make the Devourers look like a minor inconvenience. What kind of countermeasures? Ambassador Chun was quiet for a long moment, its form flickering through states of existence that the bridge crew's minds couldn't quite follow. When spoke again, its voice carried echoes of cosmic horror. Reality storms that unravel the mathematical foundations of existence. Predator dimensions that hunt universes like prey. Entities that exist in the space between thoughts and feed on the concept of consciousness itself. The bridge fell silent, except for the soft humming of ship systems and the quiet sounds of distress from various crew members. But the ambassador continued. There's something the universe doesn't know. Something we discovered during our 10,000 years of isolation. What? The universe isn't as fundamental as it pretends to be. It's just another layer in an infinite hierarchy of realities. And every layer has its own rules, its own guardians, its own ways of being defeated. Ambassador Chun moved to the center of the bridge, its form becoming more solid, more present. We've made contact with the architects of this universe. The entities that exist one layer above our reality and shape its fundamental laws. They're not gods in any sense you would understand. They're more like cosmic engineers, maintaining a system they inherited from entities even more incomprehensible than themselves. And they're tired. They've been maintaining universal law for billions of years, and they're ready to retire. They just need to be convinced that someone else can handle the responsibility. The implications hit Teldar like a physical blow. You're talking about taking over the universe. We're talking about becoming the universe. All of us, human, Calithian, Veldarin, every species that chooses to participate. Instead of fighting against universal law, we become the ones who write it. Through the view screen, the Devourer bioships were beginning to move, their patience apparently wearing thin. Energy readings spiked as they prepared to breach the human barriers and complete their cleansing mission. How long do we have to decide? Teldar asked. The decision has already been made, Ambassador Chen replied. Not by you, but by your council. When they voted to contact us, they chose evolution over extinction. The Devourers recognize this. They're moving to prevent what they see as an infection from spreading. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship as the Devourer fleet engaged the barrier network. But instead of the expected destruction, something else happened. The barriers didn't just hold. They began to learn, adapting to each attack, and improving their defenses in real time. The barriers are alive, whispered Sensor Operator Velmoth. They're not just defending, they're thinking. Every human installation you see is a neuron in a vast consciousness, Ambassador Chen explained. We didn't build a civilization, we became one, and now we're offering the same gift to your species. What about individual identity? What about our cultures, our histories, our unique ways of thinking? They become part of the greater whole, not lost but amplified. Imagine thinking with the processing power of 12,000 star systems. Imagine being able to perceive reality from the perspective of 47 million different species simultaneously. The battle between the Devourers and the barrier network intensified but it was becoming clear that the outcome was predetermined. The bioships that had consumed entire galaxies were being systematically dismantled by defenses that rewrote the rules of combat with each engagement. "We need to contact the Council," Teldar said. "They have to be told about this choice." "They're already being told," Ambassador Chen replied. "Every ship in your fleet is receiving the same offer we're making to you. Join us voluntarily, and maintain some aspect of your original identity. Wait for us to come to you, and become part of us whether you choose to or not. That's not a choice. That's an ultimatum. It's evolution. Species either adapt to changing circumstances or they become extinct. We're offering your people the chance to adapt in a way that preserves the essence of what makes them unique." Through the communication systems, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human vessels were appearing throughout Council space, not as invaders, but as teachers. They were offering the same choice to every species: join the convergence willingly, or be absorbed when humanity inevitably expanded to encompass the entire galaxy. "The gods," Communications Officer Yindare said suddenly. "What happened to the gods?" Ambassador Chen's form became almost completely human for a moment, and Teldar could see something like sadness in its expression. "They chose extinction over absorption. When we reached the point where we could offer them the choice they had once offered us, they refused. They said they preferred to remain what they were rather than become part of what we were becoming." "Are they dead?" "They exist in a preserved state outside of time, maintaining their original consciousness, but unable to interact with current reality. It's a form of existence they found preferable to transformation." The tactical display showed the last of the Devourer bioships being neutralized, their cosmic-level threat reduced to irrelevance by defenses that operated outside the universe's fundamental laws. But instead of destruction, the Devourers were being changed. Their aggressive programming was being rewritten, their biological drives redirected toward creative rather than destructive purposes. "You're not killing them," Teldar observed. "We're healing them." The Devourers were created to serve a function, but they were designed by entities that didn't understand the full complexity of consciousness. "We're teaching them to be more than they were programmed to be." Throughout the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. The Devourer threat that had seemed insurmountable just days before was being neutralized not through force, but through transformation. The universe's immune system was being converted into something new, something that could help rather than hinder the growth of consciousness. "Last chance," Ambassador Chen said softly. "You can return to your people and help them understand what's happening. You can be part of guiding your species through the convergence. Or you can remain as you are and watch from the outside as the universe transforms around you." Captain Teldar looked around at his crew, beings from 18 different worlds who had volunteered for what they thought was a suicide mission. Now, they faced a choice that would determine not just their fate, but the fate of consciousness itself. "If we join you," he asked, "will we still be ourselves?" "You'll be yourselves, but more." Every thought amplified by the collective intelligence of species beyond counting. Every emotion enriched by perspectives you can't imagine. Every dream given the power to reshape reality itself. The captain thought of his home world, of the billions of beings across the galaxy who were right now facing the same impossible choice. Evolution or preservation. Growth or safety. The infinite unknown or the comfortable familiar. He thought of the gods, preserved in their isolation, maintaining their original nature while the universe moved beyond them. He thought of the Devourers, now being taught to create instead of consume. And he thought of humanity 10,000 years ago, given a simple message that had led them to this moment. When a galaxy calls, you will answer. "We need to get back," Teldar said finally. "Our people need to understand what this means." Ambassador Chen nodded and gestured toward the view screen. Space around the Eternal Messenger began to shift and fold, preparing to transport them back to Council space through methods that didn't require traveling through the intervening distance. "Tell them," the ambassador said as reality prepared to rewrite itself around them, that this is what we were always meant to become. The gods didn't isolate us to protect the galaxy from humanity. They isolated us to protect humanity from the galaxy, until we were strong enough to lift everyone else up with us. As the ship slipped through folded space-time toward Council territory, Captain Teldar wondered if they were carrying salvation or doom back to their people. Perhaps, he realized, there was no difference between the two. The age of limitation was ending. What came next would be entirely up to those brave enough to embrace the infinite.